This pandemic has taught us that on top of being employees for all the companies that we work for, we're also very human, right? And I know that a lot has happened in the last year, but I'm really curious to hear from both of you. What are the biggest challenges that you've endured with your colleagues this year, and how have you overcome them? Maybe, Jonathan, you want to get us started on what that might have looked at like at LinkedIn?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Janelle. I think, the biggest challenge, I think we're finding one is all employees are, and all people are experiencing the pandemic differently, first of all. And so I think that's very different than it has been in the past. I think also that even the companies that are doing well through the pandemic, their employees are doing a lot less well, or their employees are struggling. I think we're also starting to see this real divide grow between leaders and employees. Leaders are doing more well, employees are doing less well. These are all different than they used to be. And so I think we're through LinkedIn, as we look at our member base, our 740 million members, we look at our employees, we look at our customers, all of these things are happening across all of those places. And I think for us, what's striking home is that there is probably a new model of leadership that is required, or that we're starting to think about. And that's really one of coming from a place of compassion, coming from a place of connecting with employees, creating clarity where possible. But very different than I think it has been in the past. This idea of really needing to be compassionate about individuals and kind of meeting them where they are. And maybe just lastly, as a result of people being in all these different places through the pandemic, employee burnout is exceptionally high. We have a product called Glint. We measure sentiment. And around August of last year, employee burnout hit this all-time high, and it's kept on increasing ever since. So I think we have to manage that, to think about how to not just deal with that, but how to inspire through that. And I think what may happen through that is really we can expect a fair amount of either employee attrition or people who are just generally looking for their next role because employee burnout is so high. So think about how to lead
get back to that and how you measure it, but I would love to hear from Reggie too on this point, because I know, Reggie, you as Chief Transformation Officer over at Carlyle, you're operating at the highest rungs of the company and thinking about this. What is the biggest issue your employees are facing?
Well, first, I couldn't agree more with what has been said. And culture at Carlyle is so very important. And I'm proud to say that even before the COVID, the notion of leaders engaging with employees and having the sort of compassion and interest was very high on our value system. But of course, that gets challenged when you're not with people directly and working with them directly. And as was said before, this notion of digital wellness and the issues people have had of burnout, digital burnout and burnout in general, certainly were issues that we've had to be confronted with. We put in training for our managers so that they can detect notions of burnout in people and help them develop ways, techniques to deal with that. So both to see it before it gets too bad and to engage in some meaningful way. So that which was already compassion, I think in the firm has had to step up to compassion in the face of you not being physically with people and having to remotely find ways to keep people engaged, keep them happy, help them set boundaries between their work and their life so that working at home doesn't become living at work in some people's cases. Those are some of the challenges we've been addressing.
Jonathan, you mentioned tools that LinkedIn has to measure employee burnout. How does that work? What are the inputs to figure that kind of thing out?
Yeah, Glint is a product that we sell publicly. It measures sentiment. It's a survey tool, and so we're able to look at aggregated data on employee sentiment. That's how we understand how burnout was trending. But it's just one of kind of, I think, many things that have changed through the pandemic. To Reggie's point on connection, people are craving connection, right? We're all working from home, or last year most people worked from home. It's really hard to connect digitally, and so the idea of trying to be able to reach out and create platforms for connection is really important. I think one of the other things we've seen is employees are speaking up more. People are just they're bringing their personal lives to work in a very, very different way. We're all seeing that in our meetings, in our kind of professional lives, but we're also seeing it on the LinkedIn platform. I think the LinkedIn platform as a place for conversation has grown pretty dramatically. We've seen many more conversations on LinkedIn over the last year. We've seen people sharing data more, sharing content in very different kinds of ways. That's all changed again. It's a real reflection that people are looking for ways to bring their personal lives to work, because they're so intertwined right now. And but I don't like that. That's not likely to change, at least not certainly to go back to the way it was before.
Well, another thing that's not likely to change is this increased use of technology, right? This was such a big year of Zoom, right, of Microsoft Teams. Reggie, where does the digital life start and end? And what are some of the risks behind the new ways that we're operating? I know you're taking a close look at that at Carlisle.
Exactly. Well, first, we're not looking back, we're moving forward and adapting to the future. And we think this agile approach to work and life is really important, something we've been practicing, but certainly we put it in turbo drive now. And the reality is, once we do return to the office, whatever that means in various environments, the important thing is to distinguish between those meetings, those interactions that are okay, if not better, to be done virtually, and those things that really should be done in person. And we're doing some real deep thinking around the sort of collaborative brainstorming sessions that certainly should be done in person, and the sort of meetings that in large groups that are geographically dispersed, it's probably better to do it virtually so that you can level the playing field of people being able to participate in the meetings in a meaningful sort of way. So there's some areas where virtual is not only okay, but better. And there's certainly those areas where in person is preferred and better. And we're sorting that out, and we'll launch it in a sort of agile way and see how it goes.
What does this look like over at LinkedIn also, Jonathan? Because, you have your own employees to communicate with, but also you had mentioned your clients as well. Like, how do you see them using the platform differently, or other forms of technology, right? I mean, that's kind of one of the benefits, too, of having both the finance and the tech, experience from both of you here also. Do you see people using platforms differently than they did pre-pandemic?
Certainly, and maybe before I touch on that, though, I think Reggie talked about agile, and I think he's spot on. What we expect to see is really this like hybrid environment, this hybrid work environment going forward, and I think it's going to be pretty messy, right? Because a lot of it will come down to how do people want to work as individuals. Some people will want to work. When we look at sentiment and look at surveys, lots of people want to get back to the office, but essentially nobody wants to get back to the office full time. So we want to get back to the office some portion of the week, or however they work, and they want to do some digital and some not in person. And I think that will play out in very different ways depending on the teams, and we'll try to organize it in certain ways. But at the end of the day, whether they're your employees or, in our case, you asked about customers, a lot of it will come down, how do they want to work? What's right for them as individuals, and what's right for their company? So I think it's going to take, a while to kind of work through this. In terms of tools, though, absolutely. I'd say one of the most interesting things we're seeing is this shift to like this event, this shift to digital events. These events used to be in person. These events are now digital. Some events will go back to being in person, but lots won't. Like this is a great forum in many ways for certain kinds of events. And on LinkedIn, we have LinkedIn Live. We have essentially an events platform. That usage is like way up, and it's really effective for certain things. And so I don't think that's going to go back to the way it was before. Lots of these events have to be in person. There's a great reason to connect, live with people, but lots don't. Lots can be done extremely well digitally. The quality of this is incredible.
So,
of
course, Reggie.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, I'm a technologist, and so I believe in the use of tools, but the reality is tools are just tools. We have to be careful that we're really thinking about what's the best way to have a productive and inclusive sort of workforce. And for us, the thing that will drive us to whether we do stuff in person or do it hybrid is what amount of collaboration is required in doing your work productively, and what amount of co-location with others is also required to do that. So we're trying to get down to really understand what drives productive and inclusive work, and then we'll pick the right tool for what works in making our work productive.
We're getting a question from the audience already, and this is really the burning question on so many people's minds, and it's how will employers start to employ a larger remote workforce moving forward? And to what extent will employers start to hire workers who are truly remote, 100% remote?
Yeah. I can start if you wish. The reality is, when I asked this question within Carlisle, I discovered that already pre-COVID, there were maybe a couple of handfuls of people that were hired perhaps remotely and certainly were working productively remotely because the team that they were working on, the work that they were doing, the geography in which they were sitting, the level at which they were in the firm was okay to work remotely. So you need to consider all of those factors in driving to that sort of reality. But the bigger reality is that overwhelmingly people need to work with others. And so I don't think we'll find mass swarms of people that will be working remotely. But I do think we need, in an agile way, to have the flexibility when this person and the skills they bring to the table and their working mode can be effective remotely, then that's fine.
How does this
Yeah,
play
maybe
out over at LinkedIn? Yep.
yeah, to add to that, I think I largely agree. I think we're thinking a lot about what there's certain roles that have to be co-located. The teams just work better. There's a real reason they're co-located. A lot of engineering roles are co-located for very good reasons, but so are sales teams. And I still think there will be roles that will be sort of remote eligible. That if the individual, if they want to work remote on a team, they can. There will be other teams that have to be co-located. And so again, I think we're heading for a world where there's, there will be a wide variety of how people work. We'll have to set a fair number of policies, and I think a lot of those policies, to Reggie's point, will be around like what's required in order to make work function, in order to make people productive, but also to inspire them, because people, are going to want to work certain ways. So I think it'll be quite different, but I think there will be definitely like remote eligible, more sort of remote eligible roles than there ever have been in the past. I don't think there's going to be a mass, transformation to remote work.
Well, it's interesting because, over in the finance industry, you have firms like Apollo and Two Sigma, and we've reported this, that they're testing, right? They're testing the potential for, 2 days a week from work from home. Reggie, what does this look like over at Carlisle? What kind of plans are you testing? And, can it be so prescriptive where it's, 1 day or 2 days for most employees? Or are you thinking about it differently in some fashion?
We're trying not to be overly prescriptive because things change and they may not work. But it's clear that there are sort of three boxes of employees that we're thinking about. There are those that, to the point we made before, can work and want to work remotely. And so they will be eligible to work remotely. And remotely doesn't mean that you never come into the office, because we also want to do community building, institution building. So perhaps, say, once a quarter, they will come into the office, but they're otherwise remote. Then there's a box of people that will go back to the office as they had before, always in the office, sort of 5 days a week, which also doesn't mean every once in a while they can't work from home. So they will be mostly in the office, but perhaps not all the time. But the overwhelming majority of people, I think, in that middle box, that will work 2 to 4 days a week in the office. That could change week to week. That could change month to month. And we want to provide that flexibility within boundary conditions so that they can work productively. And as I said, agilely work through it and see what really works.
How soon do you think that LinkedIn and Carlisle can bring their workforces back to the office, given what we're seeing with vaccinations?
I can start on that. I mean, this is a global issue. So as much as the U.S. Is moving forward, at a fairly fast clip on vaccinations, that is not the case, in other markets. So it's very, very different, kind of country by country and region by region. The way we think about it, at the end of the day, it's going to be safety first. We're going to, as we have through the pandemic, we're going to put our employee safety and our employee well-being first, and that will really dictate like when we move back to offices and at what pace we move back to offices and who gets to go back to offices first. I think the first people back to offices will be people who have a real need. Maybe it's their personal conditions that they work under, or again, it may be related to like the teamwork that they do. So it'll be very much a phased approach back in. It will be different region to region. It's still not clear. Like we have the protocols ready to go. Like when we think it's safe to go back, at what point we think it's safe to go back. But as we can tell, market to market, that's changing pretty dramatically.
Yeah. I would agree. And the reality is some of Carlisle's offices have already opened, are in regions where it's okay, and we safety first with the employees, but came to the determination that it's okay for them to go back to office. But clearly in the US and many other offices, they're not back in full speed. That having been said, there are people that, for let's call it hardship cases, really needed to leave home and work in the office. And now there are people in the office, small populations, but there are people working in the office as well. But we're thinking that with the rollout of vaccinations, both in the US and across the world, with people taking their summer vacations, and we're strongly encouraging people to take time and take some sort of summer vacation, that by the fall, we think we'll be able to sort of open all of our offices in a more fulsome way. So we're hoping for the fall and being agile in the meantime.
Interestingly, Jonathan, at the very start of this discussion, you had mentioned employee attrition and retention. Interestingly, again, tech and finance here, the biggest complaints for as long as I've been on this beat was that finance people are losing people to tech, tech people are losing people to finance. What are you seeing in terms of the decisions your employees are making in terms of where they, what industry they work in, whether they want to change jobs in light of this pandemic, and whether you're seeing any sort of competition and tension between, your companies, your industries?
Yeah, I think it's different in as much as, tech broadly has done sort of well as an industry through the pandemic. And so there's a lot of opportunity in tech. And so we, if I speak just for kind of LinkedIn and tech, we're certainly seeing, a very robust market that I think combined with, employee burnout will lead to people eventually making a decision to leave. I expect this is broad across, kind of all of technology. But as the economy comes back, this will be an issue kind of in every industry, right? You'll have a combination of businesses and industries starting to do well and employee burnout that's been, sort of simmering for the better part of a year. So my cautionary note is I think companies and leaders have to start to think about what, this is going to look like post-pandemic as industries pick up, and how to manage not just employee attrition, but again, it comes back to employee well-being. Like, part of this is creating certainty for employees where you can, kind of meeting them where they are, this different kind of leadership that I talked about. And I think another part of it is, helping employees understand what the benefits are of working where they are today versus taking a chance or moving across the street as industries start to pick up. But I expect we'll start to see this as COVID resolves.
No, I agree. I think that by the time you get to attrition, you've already lost the employee engagement game. And so what we want to do is to make sure that we have the right level of engagement with employees so that they don't even get to the point of any sort of attrition. And the reality is, it should be indifferent to industry. It should be a personal choice that someone makes to leave a company for some reasons that are specific to them. But sort of holistic industry sort of challenges shouldn't be there. And at Carlyle, we're trying to make sure that we are engaging employees the right sort of way. We do have the sensitivity to their issues. We are preventing burnout. We are looking for hints and tips of when they're getting towards that point of burnout and addressing them before that happens.
Also over in the financial industry, there was a lot of news lately about young bankers and young private equity executives and how much work they've taken on away from their bosses, away from mentorship, away from friendship from their peers. Are you noticing a difference when it comes to your younger workers at this time? And, how are you catering to their needs as they've been remote?
I don't think that we've seen a huge difference in younger versus not younger employees. I think that they come down to the particular team that they're working on, and quite honestly, their management. And that's why we're doing this really aggressive training with our managers so that they're engaging, spending one-on-one time where they can, understanding the issues that their employees have, young or old, because we think some of these issues are across the sort of age spectrum. But I do know that there are all these hypotheses about millennials and other younger generation people. But at this point, we've not seen a huge difference there.
Jonathan, are you seeing?
Yeah, I think a slightly different perspective. I would say maybe early in career versus younger and older. Like, very much people who are earlier in career are having a harder time. And maybe in particular, frontline managers, I think over the last year have had maybe some of the most challenging times, right? Frontline managers have been carrying the burden of being kind of new in career leaders, inexperienced in many cases, or less experienced. And at the same time, they have many of the same personal issues that new employees do or individual contributors do. And so I think they've really been carrying the burden. And I think so we're working very hard to kind of help our frontline managers both kind of step into this new leadership model of being more collaborative, of communicating better, of communicating more authentically and being vulnerable, and at the same time helping to kind of their own employee well-being. So I would pay close attention to frontline managers, through COVID, because I think they've borne a lot of the brunt. And maybe the other thing I would say is, again, I talked about the divide between leaders and individual contributors. I think that's very real. If you poll and you talk to leaders are broadly doing well, or at least doing better. Maybe they have the experience, maybe they have more established, home routines, but they are generally doing better than individual contributors. I think we're seeing this divide grow, and I think we have to be very conscious that we don't break our sort of social contract with our, earlier in career employees as our companies start to do better post-pandemic, that we make sure our employees are doing better as well.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that, but we do have another audience. Oh, sorry, Reggie, go ahead.
I was going to agree. I think Jonathan's exactly right. Back to that young versus old, it really is new to the firm versus someone who's been in the firm for a long time. And that's collinearity between I've been with the firm a long time and I'm a leader. So I think that that's part of what we're seeing, that people who are in the fabric of the culture, have been there for a while, know people, know how to communicate and connect with people, are doing better than the new people who are still trying to figure out, what is this environment? How am I successful in this environment? Who are my mentors, my advocates? How do I make it work? So we are doing a lot of work around onboarding, especially in this remote environment, and putting some extra activities and some extra HR programs in place to make sure that people new to the firm are being brought into the firm in the right sort of way.
I do have another question about management, but we have an audience question, and they're wondering whether you guys think that the new skills that are emerging in this hybrid digital work environment will be part of formal training going forward for companies.
Yeah, I'd love to take that, but if I can, I had one more comment based on Reggie's last response. I thought was great. Reggie touched on connection, and I think that's really core. Early in career employees, you have fewer connections inside a company, and leaders by and large have a lot more connections, and that's actually that's highly correlated with burnout. Like the less connected you are, leads to more burnout. And so I think a takeaway for leaders is really kind of working hard to help your early in career employees inside your company get connected to whomever, their peers, but really build networks inside the company, because those networks, when we were physical, you could have your spontaneous water cooler conversations, whatever else they were, to help build those networks fairly quickly. We don't have that. And so we have currently, and so we have to really work hard to build those connections. So Reggie, thanks for bringing that up. I think it's a super important point. On the skills issue, this is a great, I think it's a really, really important issue. LinkedIn thinks a lot about skills. We think about discrete skills as really being sort of the composite, or rather maybe a role is a composite of skills. Actually, we announced last week that we'd launched a new product called Skills Path. And Skills Path is really a way to help identify unique skills that are required to gain certain roles and to help train for those skills. Because what we saw through the pandemic, we saw the elimination of huge amounts of jobs in the beginning. And what we found was often the jobs that were eliminated were like other jobs that it would be possible for people to get. So in other words, like a food service worker has many of the same skills as a customer service agent, but they're lacking a few. And so if we can identify those like discrete skills and train on those discrete skills, we can actually do a great job of re-employing people fairly quickly. Not a lot of formal training, not like long educational times, just help them understand and train on those 2 or 3 skills and get them back to work pretty quickly. So LinkedIn's super focused on that. Again, just launched this product called Skills Path, and are working hard to help people gain the skills that will be required to help them reemploy quickly, either during COVID or post-COVID.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it is both an issue of skills and goals. And we have, even before the pandemic, we started and we've sort of hyperdrive the notion of skills around communication, skills around active listening, skills around empathy with your employees. And while those seem sort of nebulous, there are ways that you can help managers better develop those set of skills, better listening skills, better empathy skills, et cetera. And then to make sure that those skills that are most important are connected to the goals, performance goals that they have as well. And so we try to follow through, not just from the theoretical and the qualitative, but that which turns into actual goals for those people.
Both of you, speaking of listening skills, both of you said at the beginning that employees have felt more empowered to speak up. So if you look back at, the last couple of months, do you guys have anecdotes on maybe the most interesting thing you've heard from one of your employees and what they've wanted of you?
Yeah, I've had the fortune of speaking to, well, let me start by saying there's another program that Carlisle has put in place that's called Carlisle Connect. So every month or every other month, you're connected to a new person in the firm who you haven't met before. And you have a 15, 20-minute conversation. And from that comes additional conversations with them. So you sort of grow your network. And it's actually give you an opportunity to meet people that perhaps you wouldn't have met even pre-COVID through this program, right? In those conversations, I've talked to people who were with the firm before, went away to business school, graduate school, and came back to the firm and observed the enhanced treatment of some of these issues around empowerment, around empathy, around better communication, sharing of information, feeling like you're part of a broader community, feeling like you're part of an institution. So it was good for me to know that in our transformation agenda, we are actually making some progress, and a couple of the people I spoke to gave that observation. But more so, I think the notion of the way the firm has shown our real interest in the health and well-being of the employees, including if indeed you need to come back to the office, we put all the protocols in place, but you can come back to the office. If indeed you want to stay at home, we're not encouraging senior people to come in so that does not cause junior people to feel as though they have to come to the office. So in a bunch of ways, the employees are feeling the difference in the approach the firm has taken to really being serious about their well-being and their health.
Maybe just kind of a 30-second response on this too, because I think it's really important. I think as leaders, myself included, have really worked hard to be more vulnerable and be more open and be more, front and center with employees. We've obviously we've had like lots of reactions. Some of those reactions, there's been a lot more, emotions that have been brought to the workplace, right? Like really powerful emotions that we, typically hadn't seen. But at the same time, there's been a lot of these incredible moments of joy. People have really, as teams have tried to thrive through this, we've seen all kinds of really creative ways to help teams bond, all kinds of some of them really simple, but all these, these costume parties and all these trivia games. But it's really been great to see the spontaneous, I call them moments of joy that I think we're trying to foster, but frankly, it's very much bottoms up. And so allowing teams to, be personal, have these moments, and be real kind of in their meetings, I think has been really great to see.
So we have a minute left. Any final thoughts here? We could talk about this topic forever, and I know, I know we will be. We're talking about it for a while, so.
Well, I think two things I'd say. One, I think it's very important that employers continue to listen to their employees, because the reality is the way someone feels at this moment could change over time. So you have to stay abreast of the evolution as we all move into this new normal and this hybrid environment. And I think the other thing is to continue to show that compassion and interest in the employees in a way that they can feel it. We have a Namaste wellness program that we have in place here at the firm. And some people said, well, I'm not a yoga person, but others have said, wow, the fact that even exists, even though I may not participate in it, says the firm is really thinking about my well-being in a different sort of way. So I think that you have to be creative, you have to be agile, but you have to constantly listen and evolve as the world evolves.
I would just add, get comfortable being authentic, get comfortable, being compassionate, get comfortable learning. because I think those are all going to be the core competencies for leaders going forward.